Hello, everybody. I'm really not used to teaching remotely, so this is a new experience for me. And I really miss seeing all of my students in the classroom. But I tried to come up with an idea that we could teach without having many materials. And I figured most of you had some materials at home that we could do some exploring of paper cutting. So one of the things that you will need is going to be a pair of scissors. You're going to need maybe an X-Acto knife, a pencil maybe, a glue stick. Some people might want to use a hole punch. Some people might want to use a couple of paper clips. Some people might want to use some straight pins. But basically just a few items that you might have at home. You may also want to use some copier paper. You may need to, if you happen to have any origami paper at home, that would be great. Or if you don't have origami paper, maybe you have some gift wrap paper, which is also thin and easy to use. Another thing you might want to have is just some construction paper. Hopefully you'll have some of these things at home and you can try some of these really fun ideas that we're going to explore today. The truth is that paper cutting has an awful lot to do with printmaking because it's talking about a repeated pattern or repeated design. And when we come back to campus, hopefully we're going to be doing the 4 forms of symmetry, which really this lesson will lend itself into doing that printmaking lesson. Also, I wanted to point out that there's some vocabulary that you could be teaching your students if you were to do this lesson. For example, you might want to point out some of the famous artists who have used paper cutting as one of their art forms. And Matisse is one. Of course, we know Kara Walker is one. And there are many others. I actually didn't have the time to do them all. Also, some of these terms are both mathematical and also are art terms. So you can see the tie between math and art. So in a sense, we are talking about the connectiveness of many things. So we can see asymmetrical, symmetrical, flat, folded, square, triangle, rectangle, diagonally, silhouettes, Lisinki, kirigami, origami, and paper picado. And actually, it's funny, origami has a lot to do with paper cutting. It's a similar art form. We're not going to go over origami today. Depending on how long we're on off campus, we may be doing some simple origami as well, which is a great thing to do with young students. So also, I wanted to point out to you that I have examples here of many different types of paper cutting. Above here we have the flags, which is part of the Mexican tradition of paper cutting called paper picado. And I have an example up here of kirigami. I have an example of folded paper cutting from Japan. Here is a flat paper cut that I did where I did this as a commission piece a long time ago. Then we can think about Lisinki, which is a Polish paper cutting. And here is an example of a radial design. And here is an example of a symmetrical paper cut. Both of these are Polish. So there's a lot of paper cutting going on all over the world. And I hope that you will enjoy learning about it today and that you will be able to share this when you become a teacher and you're working with your own students. This activity is really a great one for talking about conserving paper. So almost everybody has some construction paper at their house, but even if you don't, you can use printer paper and then maybe one piece of colored paper if you have it. Now, this paper, this is a whole sheet, as you can see. And then if you were to put a half sheet beneath it. That's one way of doing it. Or you can do your half sheet in this regard. Okay? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to come up with some sort of a image, and you can think about a unit you might be teaching. So like, let's say, for example, you might be teaching a unit on masks, and you may have shown your students some masks from various cultures. And so in that light, these are some student work here. You might have a mask that looks like this, or you might have a mask that looks like this. And these are this is student work. These were done by middle school children. This one was a sample from a teacher. This one is another middle schooler. And this one is a sample from a student teacher. And then this one. And this one's not laminated, but and it's kind of a little bit of an abstract look to it. But it is supposed to be a mask. Now, the only one that was done with the paper like this was this one. All the rest, this is more of a horizontal looking face, and the rest are more vertical looking. So, what you're going to do is you're going to, first of all, that's one idea. It could be that you're having your class make a mask. Another idea would be if you had access to an art gallery, as I did. I had access to the Asian Art and Culture Center. I took my students there to look at some of the imagery in the Asian Art and Culture Center. And the students were asked to walk around. By the way, if you don't have a culture center and you just want to print out sheets to hand out around the room, like this one would be good for the mask making, that's fine too. It's not as good as seeing real art, obviously, but it is better than not giving any content and just allowing children to go to work. And a lot of times I have found that without giving a sort of a theme to an assignment, a lot of children have difficulty getting started. And the whole art period will go by and they're still trying to figure out what they want to do. So I have found that by giving a theme to students, it can be a very general theme that is good. Like, for example, this particular one was actually, believe it or not, it was on a theme about Valentine's Day. And really the only thing about Valentine's Day that's on here is the heart in the middle of the tree. But there was a theme. So there's not any one right answer to an art problem, but we do want to give some sort of a problem to get kids working and using those creative juices. So here's another one that was from the Valentine's Day theme. Okay? And on this one again, I don't know if we said nature in Valentine's Day or something, but anyway, whatever it was, there's a few hearts included. Okay? Now, by the way, this one was also mounted so that it was even more interesting. Okay, so back to visiting the Asian Art and Culture Center. So I took a group of middle schoolers to the Asian Art and Culture Center, and they walked around with sketchbooks. And they did little teeny sketches of different things that they saw there. And then they came back to the art room and came up with these results. Here's one. Another one, this one's done horizontally. Another one that I thought was quite remarkable. Another one. Another one. And this one was interesting. This student wanted to use an X-Acto knife. And this was not easy to do, to reverse these. You'll see in a minute. And then here was my teacher example. And here's another one that was done that day. Okay, now my feeling about these is that these images probably would not have happened had the children not been exposed to the art gallery. And so you can see the importance of exposing students to works of art and works of art from other cultures. So let's go back to this. And so what you're going to ask your students to do is to pick one half sheet and one whole sheet. And this should not take very long. In fact, this is one of those assignments that actually could be a follow-up to another assignment, or for elementary children, it could be done in one class period. You might have, or two, depending on how intricate you want to get. So you might come up with a background color and then come up with another color that would be contrasting, at least somewhat. And then you have the children only work on the half sheet. And they use a pencil. That we wanted to do something dealing with organic shapes and nature. So I might come in and just start with a shape. And all of your shapes ideally will touch the side somewhat. And then maybe I'm going to come up with another shape here. And then maybe I'm going to do something with a larger sort of shape. Maybe something here with other shape. And I could keep going. I'm not going to take all the time that I would like to take to do this, but I'm going to show you how, if the student then cuts along the lines that they created, and actually I made my lines much darker because I knew it was going to be videotaped, but you would not have to make them so dark. Now, whenever you're cutting for paper cutting, you leave your hand stationary and you move the paper around. That way you get a much better result, and you're not twisting your hand and hurting your hand either. So just remember that. Move the paper and not the scissors, not your hand. So as I'm doing this, I'm just saving all the pieces. And I often tell children, this is like making a puzzle. You're making all the puzzle pieces now, and you want to be careful not to cut the paper in half. One of the secrets to paper cutting is that the paper remains all one piece. And this is another secret to paper cutting, about not twisting your hand around, moving the paper. See how the paper, I'm moving it all around. And then also about trying to keep that one side of the paper all one piece if possible. And sometimes we mess up. Guess what? If you mess up, that's okay, because sometimes when you put it down with the glue stick, you can't tell anyway. Believe me, I've messed up many times. Okay. And now I'm just going to do these last two shapes. Now, I would be doing a more complicated one if I were doing this myself, probably. But I don't like to always show something so complicated to children. And in fact, many times I barely demonstrate with children, because that way they're not tempted to copy. So it's kind of important, if you are going to do a demonstration, maybe do a completely different theme. If the children are doing nature, maybe you'll do something else, depending on what you're trying to get them to do. And then, so that they're not copying you. Children are often, especially you'll find this to be true for children that maybe don't speak English as their first language. So they're not quite sure what you're saying. And so they may think, oh, that's what they want me to do. That's what the teacher wants me to do. So you want to be very cognizant of that and respectful of all the children, and try to make it clear to them that you don't have a preconceived notion of what theirs should look like. So after you've cut your shapes out, you're going to want to lay it down. And I actually sort of reversed this one. And now, and this is sort of like putting a puzzle together, and a lot of kids really enjoy this. Maybe they're going to line it up, and I always say point by point. Now, I would probably erase these lines first, but I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. But you might have that, and you get your glue stick. Sometimes you're not sure which one it is. You might have to turn it back around. Sometimes you have to, like, let's say I want to get this little piece glued down so I can see what I'm doing. Right here, this one's sticking up. And I want to get that nailed down right now. So I want to go like this. Oh, that's not the right way, is it? Oh, that's the right way. Okay, so then I have to make sure I do point to point. And then this one would be right here. And that's would be the paper cut. So you can see I'm using organic shapes, which was the instruction by the teacher, and taking it from there. One other thing I didn't mention earlier is if you wanted to make your image more complex, and that would be easy to do. For example, I'm just going to show you very quickly here. Let's say, for example, I wanted to add something to the inside of this piece. I could easily either come in like this, or I could use an X-Acto knife. And of course I have a protective mat here so that I don't cut holes in the table. But like, let's say, for example, I want to cut an image, a shape out of here, another organic shape. I could easily go like this, and maybe like this. A little bit more. That, for example. Now this shape would still go back over here, but then this shape, which was like this, would then go here, and just give it a little bit more complexity. I just want to make one more mention, and that is you realize I have nothing to throw away. At the end of this lesson, we've used up all of our materials, and there's no trash. There should not be any trash. Every sliver should be accounted for in some way. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of a nice thing to mention to your students, that you're being conscious of the environment and using your materials in a positive way. That will be the first thing you're going to try to do. So make one of these, and then we'll come back for our next step.